What if your legacy is something you put into this world to last beyond you? I'd like to welcome Rabbi Alon Ferency to the Design Your Legacy podcast this lovely morning. Welcome, Rabbi.
Welcome. Thank you for having me. It's delightful to meet.
It's my pleasure to host you. You're joining today, I think, from Tennessee.
East Tennessee, Eastern Time Zone, Knoxville. Yeah, what a lovely, smallish city. I have lived where you live. Much bigger experience with more concrete and cars. I like both. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, we were having a good conversation in the preamble regarding everything from Rick Rubin to your experiences of growing up in Boston. So, would you share an icebreaker with the listeners and viewers to just share a little bit about you? I know that I read on your profile that you were the treasurer related to human trafficking work and the avoidance of it. Not to support it, but
so was not keeping the money from human trafficking.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So share. I mean, I think you're a cyclist, and I think your father was also a cyclist. So share a little bit about your human journey from Boston to here today, if you would.
Okay. Well, my hobby now is learning to play drums. I grew up south of Boston. I was actually born in upstate New York, but spent most of my childhood near Boston. I was a theater kid. I learned to jog and cycle with my dad. You were right about that. I took guitar lessons and piano lessons and was a DJ in college. And danced. I was in a ballet of Dark Side of the Moon in college and made a little documentary movie in my senior year and was in a choir. So I've done nearly every performing art. I don't have a lot of skill with visual arts. I cycled cross country when I was 22, which is one of those things that's very hard to imagine with my body now. It feels like it was another person. Then I was in the Peace Corps in Cameroon as a community health agent. I worked on a presidential campaign, substitute taught. Then, let's see if I can get the order right. Moved to Los Angeles near West Hollywood to work in the music business. Moved to New York to get a master's degree in Jewish education, where I met my wife and did some chaplaincy training and some teaching, and did my first writing in theology, questions about God and ethics and God's role in the world. Got engaged, moved to Los Angeles for seminary, where I worked in LA County Hospital. I don't know if you've ever been out that way, but it was an incredibly challenging hospital for everyone, patients and
Is that the
staff.
USC campus?
Yes,
Yes,
yes, off
yes.
the
I
USC
know
campus.
all.
And this was before they rebuilt it, so it looked Soviet era. And it's
Okay.
a deeply poor place. I probably spent about half the day in Spanish. I believe I didn't have accurate demographics, but my sense was a large minority, if not the majority of people, were undocumented and all were uninsured. And it is a deep gang area where military surgeons will go to learn about gunshot wounds.
Do you speak
So,
Spanish? Tú hablas español.
see, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I
Estudio
mean, it's
español.
very, very rusty, but
Okay.
I love other languages. And I think that goes to the same part of my brain that likes math and music and art, just that ability to express and communicate. So I finished up there. I worked at a drug and alcohol rehab during seminary, which was one of my first encounters with artists in a spiritual setting. Came out to Tennessee to be at a pulpit from 2010, have 4 boys, thank God, who alternately bring me incredible joy and delirious madness. Have a dog, 2 cats, still been married for, I think, close to 20 years now. Drums. And I stepped down from the pulpit to coach artists and to consult to arts organizations about 2 years ago. And I
Oh,
do it
that's
from here,
wonderful.
but I work with people in your neck of the woods, Minneapolis, Vancouver, Boston, Austin. So, and it's
Oh, that's
bringing me a lot of joy.
that's wonderful. I was
Yeah.
a DJ at Penn State.
Did you love DJing? I loved it.
Yeah, WKPS. I was DJ Angel with jazz and hip hop.
I just, wow. Oh, I did jazz too. I was just jazz. That was when I fell in love with jazz. I mean, I had liked it before and I love DJing. I love that. I think my skill set is in editing and curating. I think that's where I bring a lot of value to artists, is helping them see the parts together and helping them connect disparate elements and which works and which doesn't. Yeah. Editing and curating. I've been much better at that than any actual art making.
Yeah, very cool. So I thought we might split the conversation in between legacy, but we might start with the art piece. So I kind of wondered, how and why you connected to art, but I think you might have answered that Because it's now, I wonder if it's come full circle.
It is definitely sort of the threads of my career keep interweaving. So one of the threads seems to be public service, whether it's, as you mentioned, with an anti-human trafficking organization, with the Peace Corps, or with um, city government. Another thread is cultural leadership, working across cultures, as you mentioned, Spanish and the arts, and then something like faith and spirituality, mindfulness, that internal place and a place of awe. And it's very difficult for me to clearly connect them, except in my head they are very clearly braided together, both in my personal history and in the ways they engage in the world. So I find that creativity and courage and healing are probably the values that undergird a lot of that work. But it seems obvious to me that a person should, I guess, have a spiritual and communal life, be engaged in civil society, and be making something. That those are the things that bring us fruition. I actually think the outgoing Surgeon General wrote a letter called My Prescription for America. And I think a lot of that was in his letter in terms of what could heal America and draw social bonds closer together, is the idea of creating communities. And of course, legacy, people kind of sensing what it means to be human and why we're here.
Yeah, I'm going to jump around a little bit.
Go right ahead. I don't have any, I'm a very digressive person. Yeah.
Good, good. One of the things you mentioned in one of your prior podcasts was about, what you see coming out in society today, and maybe this is art being that remedy. You talked about isolation, whether that was during the COVID era and the ripple effect of the anger, and how it's showing up in the generations today. And I wondered if maybe you thought to yourself in contemplation, artists are the ones that will release those emotions, that pent up, whatever that thing is. Because if I think about, like, I'm going to quote Brene Brown for a moment, but she said America is one of the most medicated societies out there. And it doesn't matter if people are, medicating with work or drugs or alcohol, and so I'm wondering, maybe it is the artist then that'll be able to emote what is being suppressed.
I certainly hope so. I mean, I've never seen society so distraught and angry and resentful and aggrieved and fearful and anxious. I hate to put the burden on artists of being healers and prophets. They are, but I don't think that's a fair weight to put on the artist or their art making.
Save society, artists. Go ahead.
Well, yeah. That's just, and there was a little of that when I was in the pulpit at the synagogue. This, you're going to fix it, Rabbi. And I was like, I can tell you it's bad. I can tell you there's a problem. I can show you the questions, but I don't have the answers. And I don't think that's what art is for. I mean, art that is message art tends to fail, right? There's that line from King of the Hill about Christian music, that you're not making Christianity better, you're making rock and roll worse. So,
yeah.
Yeah. So I just think it can, and I want it, but I think we need to heal artists as well. I mean, they are deeply sensitive people from which the art comes. They're distraught. And I don't think it's their responsibility to make us less medicated or less addicted. And I'm not sure I agree that it's just America.
Yeah.
I think year on year, humankind is losing its ability to sit still and to just be, and to, I mean, I'm reading a lot about the disconnection in America, but that's just the fact of where I live, I suppose. I don't know that it's different in Denmark or Nigeria. But I think people are losing touch with their neighbors and are forgetting to speak to people who disagree with them, and are only shopping in the same places that people with like minds shop, and don't go to churches and synagogues where they might rub elbows with people who are different. The last place I see in America is 12-step meetings, where you see rich, poor, black, white, Republican, Democrat, male, female, all in the same room. I think we need more of those spaces. I mean, even to an extent, the artists that I coach, there is a kind of demographic there.
Did you know in Los Angeles there's more AA meetings than there are Bible study meetings?
That feels real. I bet that's true in a lot of places. I mean, AA meetings are smaller than churches, so you could have like 12 people to have an AA meeting, but a church needs more. But
The
yeah,
Bible
that
says,
feels
yeah,
about
that's what
right.
I've been told. I have not been to an AA meeting, but I've been told
It
that kind
feels
of,
entirely possible.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I know art has done something for you because you have spoken about that you can listen to Coltrane and you're never left feeling empty.
Did I say that? That's really beautiful. I don't remember saying, unless it just slipped out. Yeah. I mean, I think when I think about the darkest night of my soul, what got me through was a psalm. And how many late nights I've spent listening to Coltrane or Nick Drake or Jimi Hendrix and feeling less alone. I mean, music especially connects with something beyond words, and the sensibilities you can have in beautiful art that transcend words and let you know, hey, someone went through this 20 years ago or 2000 years ago, and they got through it and they wrote it down for you to find. I never feel empty or alone. Yeah, I think that's true.
What is your favorite psalm? I know you've talked about Psalm 20 and
Psalm
Psalm
6
6.
does it for me. Psalm
Okay.
130. The one I meditate on is Psalm 131, which is, if not the shortest, one of the shortest. And it's about making the soul as if a nursing child, right?
Mm,
There's a phrase I learned when we were having children called being milk drunk.
okay.
That when kids have a lot of when kids are nursing, they get this kind of dopey look on them, and I think that's a great spiritual objective, to be a little bit milk drunk from grace and God's love and the world itself.
I
And I
think the
also
world
think,
needs it today. Please continue.
no, I want to hear what you have to say. Yeah,
Well, I think people need to invest in their soul and allow their souls to be fed, and they would be less desensitized. They could turn off the news for a little while and just yeah, sorry about the background noise. Um, they could just feel that part of themselves that the world can't. And because I think that is an aspect of our human experience here. I think there's that quote somewhere, oh, we're a soul having a human experience compared to a human having a spiritual experience. There's some quote about that. I'm probably butchering it right now, but yeah.
yeah. I think, as you're saying that, the first thing that's been coming up for me is like, how much time can we spend putting away our phones? As nice as it is to have this encounter with you through a screen, like the more time each day that I can spend without the constant agitation of phones, tablets, and computers, the healthier I am.
Mm,
You know, I recommend that a lot to the artists with whom I work. If you want to create, you have to take time away, whether it's a physical retreat into the woods or just for me walking the dog without a podcast. I don't know, no slight to podcasts, but I think we do need time to be daydreaming, whether it's literal technical meditation or just spacing out and being bored. The mind needs to decompress. And I think when you talk about that accelerated medication of America, if you constantly having music playing, constantly eating, constantly looking at, for some, pornography or video games, it is hard. We lose our ability to be bored. We lose our ability to be absent-minded, and that's where creativity often comes from. And if we're going to think about legacy, also, like, that line, I think it was George Bush Sr., it was Barbara Bush, I think she said, no one at the end of our lives ever thinks, I wish I had spent more time at the office. Right.
correct. Yeah. I think also what you're talking about is instead of escaping, art allows somebody to express what it is. Because sometimes we're left no other choice than to walk through the experience. But of
Right.
course, the human would be like, I'd rather escape.
Yeah. Oh,
But then to walk
I can't remember
through,
if it's T.S. Eliot or Longfellow. The only way out is through.
yeah,
Right. I think people deny that at their peril. You get a lot of broken marriages around that if they think they're just going to evade the problem.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it's scary, and I like being around the artists as someone to help them when they go through the valley of shadow, and to be a hand holder and a shepherd in those moments, but also just to confirm and encourage that going through the challenge is the point, right?
yes.
I guess there's times for distraction. I'm not opposed to watching like stand up, comedy or dumb videos on TikTok, and some of them are very clever, but we spend too much time. At least with my children, I watch them spending a lot of time in distraction, and I feel
Yeah.
bad for them.
Yeah. You've said that art makes you believe in God more than any other experience. So say more about God and about the experience.
So this is partly at some spiritual level why I'm no longer a pulpit synagogue rabbi, because I never thought I could tell my congregants I love the book of Leviticus or the book of Psalms, but I also love John Coltrane or Turner paintings, right? That they inspire me and make me feel the sense of holiness just as much. Cormac McCarthy novels, Shakespeare plays. I wouldn't say more as much as any other thing, to be fair. I mean, I would hate to say more than the birth of my children. That would be dangerous. I certainly wouldn't want them to discover this podcast in 10 years and hear that I thought, a good album was better than their birth. But yeah, deeply powerful senses of there is something greater and beyond, and certainly deeper than we acknowledge and that we can see. And we call it God. I always teach people like God is just this easy to use term because it's easy to pronounce. But I think even atheists have to have a sense that there are things that can't be put into words. I am a deep believer in science, but I don't know what preceded the Big Bang. And as far as I understand, no physicist can ever discover that, right? It's beyond the capacity of our measurement. So whatever is beyond our capacity for measurement, to quote one of my students, that's what I would call God. And there is no way to measure a painting. And there's no way to measure your favorite album or play that changes your life or a great movie. So there's something godlike there. If we are broad in what we call God, and we don't mean just the God of Christian scripture or the God of the Quran or the God of Buddha, but something broader and deeper.
Yeah, one of the things you shared in our preamble is art being necessary in society. And I thought,
Desperately.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You talked about, the amount of depression and fear today, and yet there are
Yeah.
these eternal human truths that can be expressed. And if there's 1,000 flavors or 1,000,000 flavors of God, then
Yeah.
art is that way to reach someone
Beyond logic, right?
correct, or the four walls of a church or a synagogue or a mosque or a temple or yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember the question because I just got kind of stuck in that idea.
That's okay. That's okay. I was bringing up
I think, I guess you're asking, we were talking about humanity needing art. And do you know what Maslow's hierarchy of needs is?
Yes, yes, of course. Yeah, food and survival are at the bottom, and
I don't believe that.
oh,
Well, I mean, it must be true at some level. I'm not saying you can live without food, but I don't know that we can exist.
I have to interrupt you for a second.
Okay.
So Dr. Stephen Gundry rewrote the food pyramid. I want you to rewrite the Maslow's hierarchy of needs right now.
I don't think it's a hierarchy. I mean, a society without art is just war. Right? The only other thing that humans it's just violence.
Yeah.
Right? It's just anarchy and displeasure. If we don't I think the most holy place that there are two holy places I want to visit. One was in a movie recently, and I thought of it. It's the marble quarry of Carrara, where I think all of Michelangelo's sculptures came from.
Is that in Italy?
And the cave paintings in France, which is like the earliest of human art. And I think those are sacred spaces to me. I don't know. There's this possibility of art and more so religion to be manipulative and coercive. But the best versions of those things are deeply soothing to the soul and healing and energizing. Now, I'll say to people when they encounter me and we talk about, whether I would be a good coach for them, I don't think I want people not to take Prozac, right? If you have biological depression, you should treat it with a physician. And I don't think creating can cure depression, but I do think it can cure burnout. And I think when people have felt burnt out and sort of in moral quandary at their work, what they call moral distress, it's because they're not in a space where they are creating the things in their world and in their profession that are aligned with their values. So I do think that creating can help I mean, one of the things we're seeing around America, and again, I can't speak worldwide, is burnout. I mean, that's part of why I left the synagogue, right? This COVID really accelerated burnout for people, and this sense that, I could die tomorrow. So why am I not doing and creating the thing I'm here to do?
Hmm.
And the sense of moral distress and disjuncture, discontinuity, dislinkage between who you are and what you are doing. And I find in my life and in the lives of the artists and creators whom I coach, there, if you are going along that path of creativity from the deepest part of your soul, you will be deeply energized. I don't know if it solves other problems, but it definitely gives you energy.
Well, I think it's a start. One of the things you said, and I agree with this very much, is you had talked about the world needs people to come alive.
That's Howard Thurman. I don't want to
Oh,
steal that
okay,
one,
okay.
but
But I
it's a
thought,
great yes. Yes. Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive. What the world needs is people who come alive. Yes. And
yeah,
I'm
not
even
just
misquoted.
existing. So, like, if you go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs for a moment,
Right.
if somebody's just on the mouse wheel and in survival, and they're not taking one day out of the week, whether that's their Sabbath or whatever their thing is, to just look at their life from the bird's eye view, to ask themselves,
Yeah.
what makes me come alive before getting right back onto that mouse wheel again because of that fear of, I'm going to miss, I didn't pay that bill. I'm going to miss, I forgot to sweep
Yeah.
the front porch. I'm going to miss that I didn't send that reply email. That fear of like, if I miss a detail, because it feels like society is sped up so rapidly, well, if I'm not on that thing and that the attention span of the goldfish, but then what you're talking about is we're missing out on this whole other conversation of what is it that makes you come alive, and not from like adrenaline.
I'm very curious, as someone who works with people about legacy, like counterintuitively, I think that's the question for legacy. What has made you come alive and what would you like to transmit of that beyond your life?
Mm,
Do you experience that in your work?
that's a tweetable moment right there. Say it one more time.
I don't think I can. You'll have to go back on
No,
the
I think
tape.
what you're pointing to is what made that individual feel most alive in their life. Because, like we had talked about in the preamble, nobody says, "Oh, if you just spend another hour at the office."
Right.
It's like those moments of human connection or having that experience at that location, whether that location was the vacation or that location was
Right.
seeing where Michelangelo, first found the materials to create his art. That's like, you're on the ley lines of what makes your soul sing.
I'm writing that down. Ley lines of That's a good one. I've never thought
Yeah.
about using
Well,
that metaphor.
I think again, like one of the things we talked about in our preamble is on my father's side of the family, he's a 12th generation American. But when I think about 100 years ago, why didn't my great grandparents write anything down? Well, number one, they didn't think somebody would want to read it 100 years later. And yes, of course, I would like to read it. Thank you. And number two, they may have thought that an imposter syndrome, maybe it wasn't important. Maybe them sharing what made them happy wasn't important. I think it's everything. It's everything.
Well, to be kind to them, they might have been terrified of tuberculosis at that point,
Or the
or
Spanish flu or whatever that thing
right.
was.
But
But
still, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I see these photographs and some of them are black and white photographs. But again, it's like, what, yeah, if because, that thing that might be made their soul sing can be something then if somebody finds themselves later in life and they feel lost for whatever reason, that could be like the thing that is their anchor. So they're not rudderless.
To me, that's why I read scripture, right? I don't think it's God's word, but I was like, it's a record of someone trying to figure out what's important, right? And trying, like, the ley line of the soul is a great image. Like, what is the path? That's what the Tao means. That's what in Hebrew you call the halakha, like the path that will make my soul sing. And I'm going to write, it is legacy. I mean, to me, the book of Jonah, the book of Leviticus, the book of Psalms, I'm sure for Christians, the Christian scripture, it's legacy. It's a sense of what mattered to people back then. Or if you read the Stoics or Greek philosophers, right? What mattered to people back then? What are they trying to transmit? What was of value? And can I see myself in that? And then localized. I don't know why I keep returning to this experience. I live in very close to Dolly Parton's hometown, but I never gave her much of a chance until my sister said, "Oh no, she's great." And I trust my sister with music and arts very much. So I started listening and I went to see her in concert and I was like, oh, this is incredible. Right. And I think that's also what we can transmit to future generations. I created this thing. I built this enterprise. I created this legacy or gave this gift to a philanthropic organization so that others can experience this thing that was of meaning to me. Endowed something at my church, created a small community that thrives to this day, or a charitable work, or a business, or an app that doesn't destroy the world.
Yeah.
The good kind of app that makes things better.
Yeah. I think a part of it also is like you talk about like unwinding, like how did you come out of that struggle, or unwinding, how did you find that meaning or that purpose? Because I think a lot of times we can look at the next generation and expect them to just know, expect them just to read minds. But if you
Yeah.
don't like break down, and yes, I'm going to ask you the coffee table question in a moment if you listen to any of my prior podcasts. But it's like, but if you don't share, like, how did you get from point A to Z? What went through your mind? I think that's the part that oftentimes gets missing. But it does, it requires self-reflection. You spoke about the Stoics. They were all about character. And I don't know today if character matters. I mean, I think it should matter, but it's not like, you know,
We don't talk about it. David Brooks talks about it now. I love David Brooks in his writings about all of these things. And then I was thinking, I haven't read it in 20 years, but Benjamin Franklin's autobiography is a lot of that. And
mm,
in Judaism, there was a 19th century movement that is similar to his work called Musar, which is like ethical maxims and ethical teachings and how to create an ethical life, sort of moral grounding and foundation. Yeah. I mean, I'm not someone who reads a lot of nonfiction, but I know people who read a lot of nonfiction read it for those reasons. The biographies of statesmen or great artists, they inspire you and they teach you something about the best ways to be human, which I don't think maybe TikTok can do that, but I'm not sure.
yeah. I will share before I go on to my next question that I used to study under Rabbi Jason Sobel. He was out in Malibu. He's a
Okay.
Messianic rabbi, and
Okay.
he's very good. I think he got interviewed by what was that? It was a talk show, morning talk show with Kathy Lee Gifford, and I can't think of the other host right now.
And that's just the Today Show. Didn't you just, Kathleen
Maybe
Gifford
it was
did
the
the Today
Today Show.
Show?
Yeah, I don't watch a lot of television. I wasn't allowed to watch television growing up. But yeah, Rabbi Jason Sobel, he's very reflective. But I remember one of the things he said is, and I'm not going to quote it correctly, but there's a Jewish thought that like love is the glue that keeps the universe together, something like that. That if it's not for love, then the universe falls apart. And so going back to this idea of art and being able to strive to make something of legacy, I think there's an act of love in that.
Oh, for sure. Love and healing and courage. I mean, to me, the primary value still is courage. The thing we need first and foremost is courage in life to get through. Yeah.
You have said we all have something to transform the world. The work is to get out of the way. So, what I'm curious about is how would you like to transform the world if you could distill that in 1 to 2 sentences?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'm just very sad thinking about it. Like, the world needs so much right now.
Okay.
There's so much pain and destruction in the world right now. I don't even know where I'd begin. I keep, I go through these cycles of thinking like, what is my core message? And one of them seems to be just to be aware that everyone is struggling. Right.
Mm,
The proverb is that only the heart knows its own bitterness. And I think either Plato or the philosopher Philo or both said, be kind to everyone because each person has their own battle. And we've lost a lot of compassion and togetherness. What would I like to change in the world? More beauty and joy. And maybe a sense that there's truth, but it's not fact. Those are different things. And that there are deep truths that may or may not be historical. I always joke that Casablanca is more true to me than a World War II documentary. Right? There's something very true about Casablanca that I don't get out of a History Channel documentary. Um, and then there are so many lessons that I struggle with in terms of legacy and wanting to make my mark. And ultimately, making your mark is often done within the immediacy of family and community. And this idea of being a world changer, as Stephen Jobs said, to put a dent in the universe seems very arrogant and dangerous. Most people who put a dent in the universe make a very nasty dent. Um, so I don't know. I guess maybe people could be more forgiving and more creating and less destructive, and just aware of our own tendencies to be both kind and cruel, and to keep the kindness first. That wasn't two sentences, I know.
I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful. You've also said God is the source of all of our creativity, and our job is to bring it into light and then share it with others, being a co-creator with God. And I listened to that and I thought, that's wonderful respect to give to God.
Is it? Is that disrespectful?
I think it's wonderful respect compared to making God invisible or forgetting that God is real.
Okay. I like that. Thank you. Thank you. It sounded dangerous to me, but I appreciate the way you frame it. Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of what you're doing too, is this idea of co-creating a world for God, the world that God may want us to live in, but isn't there yet, and sort of co-creating a better world. And by helping people focus on what will matter long term and what will be their legacy, and what, the framework I would use is what will it have been that they created in this world, through which they will have a legacy, God willing.
Yes. I'm going
Yeah.
to ask you a couple of specific questions about legacy, but I
Okay.
just want to circle back to something else you said. You said if the book hasn't been written, then you have to write it. And I thought, in terms of a parallel metaphor, I thought, if your family doesn't yet have a legacy template or that foundational document or vision as a reference, then you need to be the pioneer to design it.
I guess I will have to do that. Yeah.
No pressure.
I was saying to you that having written a lot of eulogies has been very beneficial, right? To see what mattered in people's lives and what was a good life and a life well led. It's not always the things you think it is. The richer people weren't always more satisfied with their lives. Rarely. I didn't see any correlation. There's no
Mm,
reason they weren't less happy because they were rich necessarily, but I didn't see them being happier on average.
mm. Yeah. I bet you've definitely seen a lot. And so I think my next question for you is, how do you define legacy, given what you've read, both religious text of the Talmud, etc., as well as what you've considered also important, which is art and the Stoics and literature and Casablanca and
Yeah. Um, I like to think about spiritual DNA, right? Like I struggle with, someone who deeply believes in physics and science. So how do you think of religious ideas? And I think of what we talk about as the soul as sort of moral and spiritual DNA, right? That we are passing on lessons to our children and our communities. And artists do that through painting or sculpture or literature. And I struggle because one of the ways I do it best is very ephemeral, which is public speaking. There's no, it's harder. That legacy is much more diffuse, right? You'd have to hear a lot of my speeches to understand the point. Whereas if I wrote it down, it'd be easier to pass on to my
I have to
kids.
I have to interrupt you on that one. So back in the day, like long ago, cavemen, cavewomen, etc., they passed on the knowledge sitting around the campfire. And I think that's why, as a society, we admire public speakers because it's like right next to jumping out of an airplane. Like not anybody can just do it. So I think that's like, I wouldn't call it ephemeral. I would call it like a gift and a talent and a skill set and yeah, all of that.
I miss it. I used to give a lot of public speeches and I miss it. It was something I both enjoyed and was good at. So yeah, that was nice about being in a synagogue, is I got to give sermons all the time and practice. Yeah.
Well, there's YouTube videos. I mean, some YouTube
Yeah, but
speakers. I mean, yeah, yeah,
it's much wilder to have I think about that as an actor, how I really never did much non-stage acting. And when you're on a stage, there is a very quick feedback loop with the audience. You can feel their reactions. And that kind of attunement is very powerful
yeah.
and exciting.
Well, I know I have a limited amount of time with you this morning, so would you share with me, um, any other insights that you had in your life regarding the eulogies and the subject of legacy and why legacy is important? I know, again, one of the things you had said is we're striving to make something of legacy, to share what we have learned and what we have grappled with.
Give me a second just to reflect.
Yeah,
Um,
I know I'm putting you on the spot. Oftentimes, one of the things
no, it's okay. It's just such a
yeah,
big and beautiful question. I need to give it its due. I don't know. Life is very short and fragile and enormous and powerful, and use it well and don't delay. Goethe said, do not hurry, but do not rest, and use your time." And I love this. I keep coming back to this quote by the Spanish writer Cervantes, which is, "We have to assert the impossible to arrive at the absurd." So dare to do, dare, whether it's creating something material or creating something in performance or creating a charitable organization or an enterprise. Dare. There is something God put you on this world to do, and your job is to find it and bring it out. And that will be your legacy.
yeah. I can definitely tell that you're an empath because you feel, and I'm going to ask you about your values in a moment, your top 3 or 4 core values. Um, is there any particular uh, scripture from the Jewish faith that speaks about legacy, whether it's with the
Oh,
family unit, whether it's with the,
I mean, there are good, there are bad examples, right? There's the narrative at the end of the book of Genesis when Jacob gives all his sons their blessings, except about a third or half of them are insults. There's a similar section when Moses dies. There's a similar scene when David dies, which is much more like the end of the movie The Godfather than anything else, where he tells Solomon who to kill. There are a lot of bad examples of it in our scripture. There are a lot of examples in the rabbinic writing of people whose teachers left them a legacy, who, and the idea which exists in Islam too of quoting your teachers as a kind of memory to them, an acknowledgement of what they taught you. I think those are the big ones.
okay, okay. Well, one of the questions I ask all of the guests is, what do you think are your top 3 to 4 core values? Because that oftentimes can be the pillars of like the chairs of the legs of a chair, in terms of the guiding principles going forward of, you know,
So courage, what I would either call wisdom or attunement or self-awareness, and healing.
mm,
That's what I'm writing about now in my own work, is courage, wisdom, and healing. And I think courage most of all. I think you can't, if you aren't going to be brave enough to face fears and to face things as they are and ask why they have to be that way or why not, none of the other values are going to take you far enough. Courage is by far the top.
very
Yeah.
nice.
And yeah.
Keep going, please, please.
No, that's it. I mean, I think courage, wisdom, and healing. And I'm not sure if wisdom is the right word. But the things I want to carry into the world, the things I want to be known for, the courage to be authentic, the courage to be vulnerable, the courage to stand up to oppression, the courage to seek change, the courage to create, for sure.
Yeah, you said we all have art to bring forward, and I thought as a parallel, we all have a legacy to claim and take agency of.
Yes, those are, I mean, deeply interwoven. Yeah,
Yes, but both require courage and time and energy, and also,
absolutely.
safety. Yeah,
And trust.
yeah. Final question.
Okay.
If you were to set aside a weekend or two to design a hardcover coffee table book of your personal legacy, what images, stories, lessons, etc. would fill its pages?
Oh, well, I mean, it's a big book, right? So I have to just give you the highlights, I guess. Um, I mean, I love telling my kids the story about the time I flirted with Britney Spears, but I don't think that's legacy. It would
That's
definitely
courage.
be it would definitely be pictures of my children, things I've written that I'm proud of. I don't know. I can't explain it. Things I like about myself are that I love to laugh, and I'm recently very proud that I have a high tolerance for spicy food.
Okay.
And I don't think it's just because it's like impressive. I think it's also because I've adventured.
Okay.
Um, Pictures of adventures, pictures of things that I did physically and emotionally that were real challenges.
Mm.
Right? Even yesterday, I play soccer, and I really should stop because my hip does not enjoy that. But I like challenging myself physically and spiritually and educationally. And I'd want my kids to know that somehow. I don't know how I would contain that in a book, but the courage to challenge yourself and to dare and to not stop growing. Maybe that's what I mean by wisdom is like this, just don't stop growing.
What's one moment that you were proud of in your life?
I would say flirting with Britney Spears is pretty great, but that's not, what is it? A moment.
I'm sure you felt alive.
I mean, there have been moments in my career where I think I've saved lives.
Mm.
One or two times physically in the Peace Corps, and a lot of times where I think back, it's very easy to imagine as a rabbi that you're just selling snake oil, but I think there are people who are alive because I was there. Just as there that I'm alive because there was people there for me and albums that got me through the night. Um, I think I'm most proud of things like that.
Okay. And tell me
Where
one thing.
where
Go ahead, please, please.
no.
The other thing before I wrap up, you had mentioned, in your hardcover coffee table book that you love to laugh, and I wanted to also ask you, what's one thing that makes you laugh?
I love stand-up comedy.
Mm.
I love Roy Wood Jr. and Gary Gulman and Michelle Wolf and Ali Wong. I am capable of seeing the absurdity of living, right? There's just a lot of absurd around us that this life is very hard. And if we can't laugh at it and laugh at ourselves, my children make me laugh quite a bit. They say some wild things that are sometimes very offensive. Um, my wife can make me laugh. I think I make myself laugh a lot. And I don't mean to say like, oh, I'm so funny. I just amuse myself. I can run an internal joke and think how silly something is, and it makes me smile, which probably makes me look like an idiot when I'm walking down the road, but it makes me happy. What We Do in the Shadows is one of the greatest comedies of all time, and I'm rewatching it. Those are some of the things. Yeah.
Good, good. Well, better for the people around you to think of all the things that made Rabbi Alon Ferency laugh than
Yeah.
he was disgruntled and frustrated with the world, right? So, yeah.
I have bad temper. I can be annoying too. I
So,
can be plenty unpleasant.
I want to take a moment to thank you for being a
Thank
guest.
you.
Yeah, it started out today's podcast with the intention of what if your legacy is something you put into this world to last beyond you. So, if there's a website or any way for a listener to get in
Yes, please.
contact with you,
Yes.
please share it at this time.
My email is rabbi@eclecticcleric.com. The website eclecticcleric.com is probably going to be remodeled this month or next. Those are probably the best ways to reach me. You can sign up through the website. I have a newsletter. I coach people. I'm happy just to have conversations.
Yeah,
Eclecticcleric.com is probably the best bet. Rabbi@eclecticcleric.com is always good.
yeah. Very nice. I think just to touch on some of the key points of today's conversation, you brought up the question of, what what makes a meaningful and a successful life, and also thinking about the spiritual DNA, passing on those lessons, and Psalm 131, along with Psalm 12 that Elvis liked. You had mentioned that in a prior podcast, and thinking about, truth versus fact, and also investing in art as a part of your personal development. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
You heard me very well. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
In closing, I'm Angelina Carleton, the hostess of the Design Your Legacy podcast, as well as the founder of Legacy Planning, a boutique advisory firm based out of Beverly Hills, California, USA, but international in those I coach and consult. I hope to dive deep into subjects that can help a person define, develop, and execute their legacy, and continue to scour the landscape for those who can be great resources to every dimension of your legacy. For many listeners, there can never be enough education and preparation in the moat around your castle. Whether you find yourself with new wealth or generational wealth, may the content on this channel be an anchor in any storms ahead. We do our best to provide original content for your intellectual and emotional curiosity. If you're tuning in on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, etc., please remember to share with your family and friends, rate and review, send an email to either Rabbi Alon or myself, and share your thoughts and feelings. So thank you so much for joining us once again, and thank you to Rabbi Alon for speaking into your legacy.
Thank you.